Ready? Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, can you all hear me out there? I have got quite a booming voice, so hopefully that'll come across this afternoon. It's always interesting standing up here. I've done quite a lot of this over the years because there's the expectation in you guys as to what I'm about to say. And I'll let you into a secret. I don't know myself. So this could be an interesting afternoon, but as you can see, my name is Andy Holmes. You may, I'm hoping some of you recognise my voice at least from being political reporter at BBC Three Counties Radio. I've been doing the job for about a year now, and it's still fantastic for me to say that I work for the BBC, and I'm so proud. And you'll hear my own mental health story a bit later on in the afternoon. Although I have done a lot of this over the years, I am about to do a first for me, and I'm really excited about this because I get to do the housekeeping announcement. So here we go. Please read this aloud, apparently, at the start of your event. So let's see. The fire alarm is a loud, continuous tone, and if it should sound, please use the emergency exits. The assembly point is opposite the main entrance, which hopefully you'll all know because you've all hopefully come through the main entrance to get here. There's no smoking inside the building, but an area for smokers has been provided outside the main doors. That's in the designated smoking area. It says, please switch off your mobile phones, although we don't mind pictures being taken necessarily, I'm guessing, because obviously these days we are all about social media and the hashtag Just Talk, so just put your phones onto silent, I think. And it says, in the event of the fire alarm being activated, and we're not expecting a test or anything this afternoon, leave the building immediately by the nearest fire exit and assemble in the car park outside the main entrance. So that is a box ticked in the bucket list of life. And we will get on to why we're here this afternoon. So we're here to talk about Just Talk, and I'm assuming most of you in the room know what that's all about. If you don't, the next 3 hours will tell you an awful lot. We've got some wonderful stories from some wonderful and, dare I say it, brave and courageous people who are going to come up onto this stage and share their experiences of young people's mental health. So to kick us off this afternoon, the Director of Public Health for Herts, it's Professor Jim McManus.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Jim, and I'm the Director of Public Health. And it's good to be in a room full of champions, because that's what each and every one of you means, I think. To be in a room full of people who have either experienced mental health issues, or experienced bullying, or be caring about bullying, or be caring about mental health issues, means that we can change things. And that's the reason we're here. So I got bullied at school, and I got it back, my own back on the rugby field, because I would do, given the size of me, wouldn't I? But I realise actually it's not the same for everybody. And if you experience mental ill health, I think that's my phone setting that off. There was something I wanted to read from it, so I'll put it over there. If you experience mental ill health, sometimes you can feel very, very alone. And the importance of Just Talk, for me, is to do three things. Firstly, that mental health is no different from having a physical issue or a problem. And it is okay to have it, and it is okay to talk about it, and it is okay to own it. Secondly, everything can't be wonderful all of the time. And it's okay to feel like you can't cope. And it's okay to need to reach out. And thirdly, we need to get everybody to realise and accept that. And actually to realise and accept that is a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness. So you are my champions because of the work you do, paid or unpaid, because of what you do every day, and because of the way you are. And Just Talk for me is a social movement, like any social movement. Now, 4.5 years ago, a lady in this room, Councillor Teresa Heritage, who sat there, pointed out that there are issues and challenges with mental health support and services for our young people in Hertfordshire. 2.5 to 3 years ago in this room, we had loads of children and young people and professionals sit in this room discussing child and adolescent mental health services, and the fact that while there were some good things, there were some not good things. And we're on a journey. And that journey needs several sets of people for us to get there. And the end point of that journey is that every single young person in Hertfordshire feels it's okay to be them, whoever they are, feels it's okay to feel safe, feels loved and feels supported, and feels that you can do what you want to do with your lives, and that we are behind you and supporting you, and that the services are there for you. That's the end point. Whether you have an issue with anxiety or fear or depression or any part of your identity, you are precious to us and loved. That is the end point that we want and need to get to as a county. And we've got work still to do. One block of that work is to make sure that services are the right services and are there when people need them and are doing the right things. Yeah, we've got some things right, we've still not got other things right, and we've got work to do. The other block of that is to make sure that everybody feels it's okay to talk about it. Now, we didn't talk about cancer 10, 15 years ago, and we've come a long way with that. So, by the time we are 5 years into this, I want to see our societal attitudes to mental health change in Hertfordshire, and I think they are changing. So that's what we're about. And the other big building block is to make sure that when someone talks and raises it, that we all know where we can signpost them and we can all accept that. 1 in 3 of you in this room will have or have already had some kind of mental health issue. Some of us have been bereaved. Some of us have experienced mental ill health when we were diagnosed with things like cancer or other stuff. That was my experience. So it affects all of us. It is a normal part of our coping. And there are gender differences. It is more difficult for boys sometimes to speak up. And that's one of the reasons we're here today. So I want to thank you for all you do, because actually without you this will not work. I want to thank you for your bravery in speaking today, and I really want to thank you, as I know, for the work that you'll continue doing when you leave here today and spread the word and create a social movement. If we can change racism, if we can change homophobia, we can change mental health phobia. It is a stigma. It has no place in our society. Let's eradicate it. Thank you for listening.
And thank you, Jim, for some very inspiring words there. I think the thing I picked out on that is the fact that there's been so much progress that's been made in Hertfordshire over the last 3 or 4 years on this, and fingers crossed everyone in this room, with the events like today and obviously things that we're doing in the future, will improve on that as we go forward. And one woman who has done an awful lot to help with that, she's a colleague of mine, or a former colleague of mine. She's also a friend of mine, a woman called Jen Beer. Now, me and Jen go back, I'd say 4 or 5 years. We both used to work at Buckinghamshire County Council. I was in the communications team and she was in the public health team. And I don't know how we got onto the subject of mental health, but it was fairly early in our conversations that we started chatting, and it was obvious to me early on in the proceedings that this was a woman who was as passionate about mental health and doing something about it as I was. I think we went to various school assemblies together back in the day to try and do something about that message. And now she's obviously at Hertfordshire within the public health team there and doing the same, and doing an awful lot on obviously the Just Talk campaign. So I'm not going to make her blush anymore, other than to say that she's a wonderful person and she's going to give us a wonderful speech right now with Just Talk, the story so far. Jen Beer.
that was very cruel of Andy, because I very easily blush and now I'm all flustered. We're just going to watch a short film first, and then I'll talk through our Just Talk journey, really.
In Hertfordshire, young people just talk about mental health. They know talking shows strength. Use the hashtag JustTalk to join the conversation.
I'm Neil Laybourne.
I'm Johnny Benjamin.
We're here today in Hertfordshire to support the campaign Just Talk, about somebody being able to say what's on their mind and know that it's okay not to be okay.
The first time that I talked was actually to Neil, really, when I was on a bridge and I wasn't well and I was suicidal. So that was the first time that I opened up, and I'm really glad that I did, because it got me here today.
I didn't know that I would be good at listening to somebody, just asking questions and just giving somebody the opportunity to talk. I didn't know was going to have such a big difference until I was reunited with Johnny 6 years after that, and found out that that's the small thing that could have helped. So yeah, we encourage anybody to just talk.
Just talk. Talking shows strength.
Hi, I'm Owen and I greatly support the Just Talk campaign.
Hello, my name is Louis and I'm supporting the Just Talk campaign.
My name is Jamie and I support the Just Talk campaign.
I'm Tom Cleverley from Watford FC, Just Talk.
Hi, I'm Andrew Gray from Watford FC, Just Talk.
I'm Abdul Gray from Watford FC, Just Talk.
I'm Adrian Barrett from Watford FC, Just Talk. Everyone struggles sometimes. Talking shows strength.
I am Christian Cavaselli, I'm supporting Just Talk. We all struggle sometimes, and talking shows our strength.
Hi, my name is Ben. I'm 17 years old and I go to school in Hertfordshire. None of us can solve our problems by keeping them hidden. Just talk.
Hi, I'm Imogen Brown, a youth support worker in Hertfordshire. Don't just leave it. Get help now. Just talk.
Hey, I'm George. I'm 16 and I go to school in St Albans. Just talk, because your problems are smaller when you talk about.
Hello, my name's Benji. I go to school in St Albans. Just talk, because boys can cry.
Hi, my name's Freddie. I'm 15 years old and I go to school in Hertfordshire. The message I've got for you lads is, don't just sit on the sideline, speak to someone. Hashtag just talk.
Ready? Hey, I'm Manus. I'm 16. I'm from Sandringham School, and I believe that staying quiet exacerbates and talking alleviates. Just talk.
I'm 16, and I think we should remove the stigma and just talk.
Hello, I'm Debbie Roberts, YC Hertfordshire. I'm a project officer, and I'm here to remind you that we all have bad days. It's just important we talk. Talk to each other, talk to whoever, but talk.
Hi, my name's Leah and I'm 15 and I go to school in Hertfordshire, and I think it's better to speak up than to shut up. Just talk.
Hi, I'm Ridla. I'm in year 13 in Sandringham, and my message is it's better to say something than to say nothing, so just talk.
Hi, I'm Stan. I'm 16 and I'm from Soldier School in St Albans. It's better to say something than suffer in silence.
So some familiar faces on there, and I'm sorry if we embarrassed anyone who wasn't aware they were going to be on the big screen there, but I think it's a really nice way to sort of kick off, to show the sorts of things, the sorts of conversations we've been having with young people, with local professionals around this campaign. And it's a really simple way to get the message of this campaign out there. We've got boards on all the tables, so I do encourage you, if at any point during the afternoon you want to tweet a picture or anything like that, please do. So, just talk. Let me see if I can work this. No, is the answer. So, just to introduce myself, obviously building on from what Andy so kindly said about me, I'm Jem Beer. I'm the Health Improvement Lead for Children and Young People in the Public Health team. And yes, I'm very passionate about mental health, as I know every single person in this room is. So I just wanted to share our story really of what's happened so far with Just Talk, so that you can hear the kind of success stories and also look at kind of what we've got planned. So some background, why? Why are we doing this? Why does it matter? Well, we know it matters because a lot of us have mental ill health. We know this. 3 young people in every class on average will have a mental health issue. We see these stats every day, but they matter, they're important. And really importantly, all of us have mental health. While 1 in 10 might have a mental health issue, every single one of us has mental health. And at some point in our lives, we may experience mental illness. And we need to be ready for that if it happens. And we need to take steps to attempt to prevent it. And there are things we can do. We know that mental health problems start early, so 50% by the age of 14, 75% by the age of 24. So it's really crucial that we're working with young people. It's such a key time in our lives. Prevention and early intervention is vital. We know that if people get help earlier, they're more likely to get better, and they're more likely to get better more quickly. Really important. And why are we focusing on boys? Well, one of the reasons is we know that boys are 3 times more likely to take their own lives than girls are. That's not something we can ignore. You know, that's a terrifying statistic, really, when you think about it. Happily, the figures are small. We're not talking huge numbers of boys by any means, but every single one that occurs is such an enormous waste and has such a profound impact on the family and the friends and just the whole kind of society around that young person. So we need to do everything we can to stop that from happening. Fear of stigma and discrimination, that's something that I think people talk about a lot who experience mental illness. But it seems to particularly affect boys. It seems to be more profound for boys that experience. There's a real sense of fear, of shame, of genuine fear of judgment, that people will look at me differently if I talk about this. And again, as Jim was saying earlier, that's something we need this movement. We need to make sure that that isn't the case, that people do not feel that way. And in research we've done locally, we know that 16% of boys, when we ask them if you're struggling, if you're feeling low, if you're feeling stressed, if you're feeling anxious, how do you cope? 16% of boys couldn't identify any coping strategies at all. They just couldn't think of any. That's twice as many as girls. And a further 17% just said, well, I would do nothing. I'd wait for it to pass. Sometimes it does pass, but the problem is sometimes it doesn't. And if those coping strategies aren't there, then that's when problems arise. So Just Talk, how has the campaign developed? Well, as I say, we've done some local research. We've also looked at national research. The Time to Change team who are here today, we've worked with very closely on this, and they fed into the project that we put together. So we also knew from local information that boys need more support. So local service information, for example. We knew that the COOF, online sort of support system that we have in Hertfordshire, COOF just wasn't getting as many boys accessing it as girls. And in a way that came as a bit of a surprise because we hoped it would, because it's more anonymous than some of the support that's available for young people. But we were still seeing boys they didn't feel that that was something that would help them. Although a lot of work has been done on that, and I think the numbers are slightly more even now. So we set up a group, we set up an engagement sort of event to just sit around a table really informally and say, okay, this is a problem. What are we going to do about it? We had no budget. We all had our existing kind of work objectives, but we all sat around and we said, well, it doesn't matter. We're going to make this happen because it has to happen. It needs to happen. And I think there were around 20 of us at that initial meeting, which actually I thought, for an informal just kind of invite people along meeting, I was really pleased with 20 people who just showed up, sat down and said, let's do something. And because we knew we didn't have the budget, we didn't have huge amounts of capacity, we were looking at really practical solutions that we could come up with. So we agreed to start with secondary school boys. That's not to say that mental health issues are exclusive to secondary school age boys. Certainly something we want to do in the future is look to how can we share the kind of messages and the scope of this campaign to look earlier, to look at primary schools, to look at specific groups. So to take that sort of social marketing approach at narrowing it down and saying, okay, how does this campaign, how does this movement, as Jim said, how does this resonate with different groups of young people? But we needed to start somewhere. So we've started with secondary school age boys as our initial focus. And importantly, because the question I get asked a lot about this is, why are we just focusing on boys? Importantly, you'll see Just Talk, it's a campaign. All of the key messages are completely and totally relevant for girls as well. And Time to Change research told us that if a campaign is developed for girls, boys and men won't engage with that. But actually, if you develop a campaign for boys and men, girls will still engage with it. So we're really hopeful that by taking this sort of male-focused approach to develop this campaign, we're not excluding girls and women at all. So these are some of our partners. I think that speaks volumes. I mean, that is such, I mean, this is my favourite slide, by the way, of the presentation. I just think it's so fantastic. And this is only some of our partners as well, because I'm sure there are other people within this room who are quietly sort of cursing me at the moment. This is some of our partners that have really driven this piece of work forward. And what a fantastic achievement for us all to have worked together in this way. I'm just so proud of it. I just think fantastic. Some have been more or less involved than others, but everyone has played a role. Some have been involved from right at the beginning, some have come on board during the journey, but now we have so many partners and so many schools as well that obviously we couldn't include every logo of every school on this slide, but so many schools supporting this campaign. So phase 2, we had everyone, we had the will, we had a kind of objectives and aims, what we want to achieve, but what then? Well, we knew we needed a bit more data, so we ran a survey. And we targeted teenage boys. And we were a bit worried about this because we know that boys don't tend to respond to surveys about mental health. But with the help of particularly YC Hertfordshire and Debbie and the help of schools, we managed to really get a lot of responses to this survey. So we had over 650 teenage boys from Hertfordshire completing that survey and sharing their thoughts with us. And that was their attitudes towards mental health, their behaviours towards mental health, their knowledge of support services. It gave us a wealth of data on which we could build this campaign and this project. We also ran some focus groups as well when we had sort of some issues that we wanted to delve into a bit more deeply. We then recognised that although we'd started with zero budget, there was going to be some cost associated. So happily, Public Health and the CAMS Transformation team, we managed to identify small budgets. And that's for things like the event today, design costs, stuff like that. And that has helped the whole process, I have to say. We then got a social marketing design company involved to design our campaign. And every step of the way, we've made sure that boys are involved in this. Boys ask, is this working for you? What do you think? How do these messages resonate? And this is the campaign we came up with, the campaign we're here today to focus on, Just Talk. And I was in the initial design meeting with the design company and a group of teenage boys. And what was wonderful is this was actually our first draft, I would say, this logo. And the boys looked at it and they just said, that works. It symbolises to us interconnectivity. It symbolises strength and the close bond that's formed by two people having a conversation. That's genuine quotes that I'm saying that the boys around the table said to us, and we were blown away. We had some different campaign names, but it was the boys that told us Just Talk was the message that resonated for them, because they wanted it to be simple and direct, and action that should be taken. So that's how it came about. So the key messages of Just Talk. We're all affected by mental health, just like we're all affected by physical health. Talking shows strength, not weakness. So key. You're more likely to get better if you seek help early, and there are simple and relevant ways to improve your own mental health. There's support and information available, and it can really help. We also sort of have touched upon the idea of social norming. So actually the fact that, yes, there are young people who are nervous of coming forward and nervous of speaking, but actually 70% of boys in Hertfordshire do think it's okay to talk about mental health. And that's something to be celebrated. We want to make it 100%, but 70% is a good start point, and we can build from that. So, the most recent phase, the launch. 22nd of January we launched, and I want to thank every single one of you in this room who contributed to that. I think all of us as a team who have been working on this were blown away by the amount of support, the amount of engagement. A quarter of all secondary schools we know of have already engaged with the campaign. We're so pleased with that. It's year one. You know, that's the first time we've launched this campaign. So happy with that. We have a suite of resources and information on the Healthy Young Minds and Hearts website. So do check that out if you haven't already. Lesson plans, activities, films, more of the films that you saw earlier, all sorts of things on there. Short things to use in assemblies, hopefully really practical tools. But we're always going to be building on that. So any feedback anyone wants to share with me, please do. And it was important to us that within the short films, we had a combination. We had big names, so people like the Watford Football Club players, people we kind of look up to, role models. We also had local role models. We had local professionals that we know, work every day with young people and have a story to tell. But so importantly, we had to have young people. This wouldn't work if we just had a load of adults talking to young people saying, this is what you should be doing. What's making this a success is people like the Youth Health Champions, people like Welwyn Hatfield Youth Council, people from within the schools, the Priory School, Sandringham School, loads of schools, the Reach. I'm not going to name them all because I'll forget some and then I'll feel bad. But so many young people coming forward supporting this campaign, and that's so key to its success. We've also had loads of social media activity, which I'll go on to speak about. And then here we are today, our professional event, which is really at the beginning of our journey to share what's happened so far, what's working, and then to look at what we're going to do next. Because this is just the start of the journey. We've launched the campaign, but how do we take it forward? Social media. So just a snapshot of some of the things that have happened on social media. These are from Twitter. Jack Wilshire, Maria Nastri, the CAMS Transformation Manager, was fantastic and managed to speak to Jack Wilshire and ask him to support the campaign, and he wrote a tweet for us just saying how important it is to just talk. We also had Ian Lee retweeted, if anyone saw him in I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, fantastic, always talks about mental health and his own mental health, a great role model again. And Matt Haig, who's a mental health author, has also tweeted. So just quickly, some of the social media responses that Jack Wilshire had, I just thought were really interesting to share. I won't read through each one, but I particularly like the last one. Good man Jack, worthy cause to get behind, and a man with a profile platform as yours has a chance to make a real change regarding masculine attitudes towards mental health. Really great to see people engaging with that. And I didn't see many negatives, I have to say. It was all really positive. People responded really well. So very quickly, this is what really blew us away. Almost 9.5 million potential Twitter impressions in that first week. Obviously hugely helped by Jack Wilshire tweeting. But also we had so many local teams tweeting. We had the Ollie Foundation, Hector's House, HCC, loads of different schools were tweeting, YC Hertfordshire, everyone was tweeting. How fantastic. We had 1,430 unique tweets. And importantly, 58% of the audience were male. We weren't, that's fantastic because we weren't targeting males with in terms of who we were tweeting. The tweets were just out there. And normally with a mental health campaign, you'd see far more females engaging with it. So that was a really positive thing. We've also done some work on Facebook and Instagram, and again, really big numbers of engagement on that. So we're really positive that that's really one of our first forays into social media with a young person's campaign for public health. So we're really excited by that, and we intend to build on it. We've also had newspaper and radio coverage, which has been fantastic. And I've already said loads of resources online. Please do go and have a look. There's so many different things on there. And as I say, if there's something you want that isn't on there, tell us, and we'll find a way to make it happen. So finally, what happens next? Well, we're going to be widening the campaign, as I say, hopefully working with primary schools, etc. Working with parents is going to be a key area for us. We have a task and finish group that will be specifically looking at that. We do already have a parent top tips leaflet, but obviously that's not enough. We need to do more than that. Role modelling, we all have a role to play. And just wanted to quickly say, these are inspirational people, utterly inspirational people. You have Lincoln, instrumental president who helped to abolish slavery. Winston Churchill, one of the most admired people of all time, We have Ryan Reynolds, GQ Man of the Year, very handsome. Just throw that in there. Heavyweight champion of the world, Frank Bruno. You know, these are people we associate with strength, that we admire, that make us laugh. These are people who openly will talk about mental illness. And these are people that we need to celebrate. We need to all be talking more openly about mental health, like all these people are, because quite frankly, sometimes in the media, all we hear about is the negative stereotypes. You know, if something awful happens, like the shooting in America, it gets turned to, well, it's a mental health issue. But really, the story is you can have a mental illness and be an incredible human being. It is not who you are, it's just an illness. So I just wanted to flag that up. And just some quotes to end with. So courage is what it takes to stand up and speak. Courage is also what it takes to sit down and listen. Churchill. Young people have constantly said to me during this campaign, this should be just talk, just listen. That's come up a few times, and I think it's a really good point. The truth is incontrovertible, malice may attack it, ignorance may deride it, but in the end there it is. Churchill again. Sorry, I watched Darkest Hour recently. But again, it's true. And the truth is, mental health affects everybody. So we all have to talk about it and we all have to take action. Talk to someone because it helps. That's the one I wanted to end on. That is a young person's quote from our survey. Simple, to the point, and exactly what we have to go away thinking and celebrating. It does help. It can help, it does help. And that's the absolute key thing. So thank you so much for everything you've done for this campaign, and I hope that the rest of the day today will be really helpful and inspiring and give you some ideas on how we take this forward. Thank you.
Jen Beer, ladies and gentlemen, as ever, putting the passion into mental health and really coming across really nicely. I thought for me, the male role models, as a man myself, having somebody like Jack Wilshere tweeting and normalising it, saying it's okay to not be okay occasionally, was brilliant. And for me, Marcus Trescothick, I don't know if anyone knows who he is, the England cricketer, he did an autobiography in 2008 called Coming Back to Me. When I read that and I thought, hang on, this is a guy that's faced, you know, the fastest bowlers in the world, and yet he has the same problems as me. It just helped to normalise it. So I'm sure everyone in the room has their people out there that does that for them. So thank you for Jen for bringing that up this afternoon. We have plenty more speakers to come this afternoon. We are going till about 4:30, I think. There's an opportunity later on. This is going to be really exciting. There's going to be a table planning activity taking place later on, which I think today is about looking back, but it's also about looking forward. And we will be looking at how we can improve the future of mental health for boys in Hertfordshire. That's later on. But before all of that, I have a lady called Liz Biggs. She's the programme lead for children and young people and maternity at Hearts Valley CCG, and she's going to talk to us about the CAMS transformation.
Okay, good afternoon everybody. Thank you very much for that introduction. I just wanted to thank Jen as well. And when you sit there and hear the amount of passion that Jen puts across in that presentation, knowing that you're coming to speak next is quite a daunting task. So I will embarrass her slightly more on that. So I'm talking about CAMS transformation, and while that's my name on the slide there, I really need to start by saying I'm really representing quite a number of colleagues who are in the room here today who actually come together, who've worked on CAMS transformation over a number of years. And I would echo the point about being in the room with a load of champions. There's people in this room who I think have worked on this agenda for as long as I have, which goes back about over 15 years. So it is fantastic that there's such a commitment in relation to this. So this little kind of section of the programme is quite a bit like a commercial break. It isn't really as exciting and as really engaging as some of the other things that you're going to hear about, but it just gives you a little bit of context in terms of the work that's going on behind the scenes and almost the strategic work that we're doing to ensure that the profile of children and young people's mental health remains in place across everybody within Hertfordshire. So we have a plan in Hertfordshire which came down as a national requirement to have, but we already had a huge amount of work that was going on across a number of partners around mental health and children and young people's well-being. So that comes together in a 5-year strategy. A copy of the document you can see there, and we'd encourage you to go to the Healthy Minds website to have a look at that. In essence, it's about working together to improve mental health and well-being for our children and young people here in Hertfordshire. And if I bring you right up to kind of date in terms of some of our most recent work, we were one of 10 areas that received a CQC thematic review around children and young people's mental health. And that's some of the work that has informed the green paper that came out at the end of last year. So in terms of the work we're doing in Hertfordshire, it's really good to have the opportunity to profile that, to know that that's feeding into national agendas. So do take the opportunity to look at that plan if you haven't done so already. One of the key features in the plan is how we want to work moving forward. Jim made reference to the journey, and I think that's really important that we stress that we are on a journey with all of this agenda. One key part of our journey is about looking at how we work together across the system, and we're working to implement a model which is called a Thrive approach, which is not about having tiers, which is often a terminology that's used to describe our mental health services, but it's much more of a continuum for our children and young people. That's it in essence. The plan talks about it in a lot more detail, but it's the flow through for children and young people around that model, around for young people to thrive. A couple of highlights around what we're working on across the system in relation to that model. Focusing on the prevention and promotion and early intervention. As we've heard already, getting in early is really, really important. If we can do that, that serves for much better outcomes for our children and young people. So we're doing a lot of work to make sure that resources are available as early as possible. Some of that includes resources for our schools. Deborah's going to talk a little bit about that later on. Some of that is making sure that our staff across the system are well trained in terms of responding to children and young people, signposting to other services. We heard reference to Couth, which is an online service available for children and young people. So there's some really exciting work going on about that in recognition of how important that early intervention and prevention agenda is. So there's a whole context out there which underpins this focus around Just Talk. If you want to know more about that, as I say, do go to the Healthy Young Minds website. A huge amount of resources on there, and that's where we post any news or updates in terms of the work that we're actually doing across the system. I'd also encourage Jen's point about if there's things on there that you want that you don't think are on there, again, do contact us and let us know. We want to make that as beneficial as possible for everybody using that. And again, just to reiterate the importance of that kind of Just Talk, and I know you're going to hear so many other fantastic examples about that, and I'm really grateful to have had the opportunity just to set some of that context on behalf of the system of Hertfordshire in terms of the work that we're doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Liz, for that. That's Liz Biggs, Programme Lead for Children, Young People and Maternity at Hearts Valley CCG. And it's excellent and I think vital going forward that as many organisations across Hertfordshire work together on this so that we can find some fantastic solutions going forward. And I'm just looking at the schedule now and it's me introducing me. So sorry about that. I've been asked by Jen, obviously, to host today, and I was more than happy to do that, to spread the word. I've also been asked to speak about my situation. Now, for me, standing up in front of you or being on camera or being on a microphone is something I'm very used to. Telling the story that I'm about to tell you is not something I'm used to. So I admire the lads who are going to come up later on, because when I was your age and going through the bullying and everything that I'm about to talk about, there is no way I'd have stood up in front of people to do that. So I admire what you're about to do later on. But for now, you've got me for the next few minutes just telling my story, so bear with me on this. So picture the scene. It's the mid-1990s and there's a young boy who looks a lot like me, only he's slightly younger and with one of those dreadful curtain hairstyles that we had back then. We all had them in the 90s, trust me. Anyone else have them in the 90s? Yes, there we go. I'm not the only one. Now, This lad should be worrying about his GCSEs or even the ever-faltering fortunes of his favourite football team, but instead he's stressing about how he can get through another school day. He's doing okay in his studies. He's probably doing better than okay, but he doesn't rate himself particularly highly. He's in the top set for most subjects, even though his maths teacher calls every mistake his class makes a Sheath up, because Sheath was this guy's surname at the time. But he knows that his school day will probably consist of some of the following, and will be a battle for survival, if you will. He'll be asked if he's gay. For the record, he isn't. He's just shy and sensitive, that's all. And on the one time he tries to prove he's not gay, by actually asking a girl out, the majority of his science class, including the girl he asks out, calls him sad, and he's bullied about it for weeks. He'll be teased about that surname of his because it means condom, yes. So much so that he'll change his surname to Holmes pretty much as soon as he turns 18 to try and get away from those memories, not realising that by trying to do that, he'll be facing that challenge for the rest of his life. He'll probably be given a dead arm as well by one of the boys. Although the physical pain from the dead arm fades quite rapidly, it's the mental scars that don't heal. And aged nearly 38, believe it or not, he wonders if they ever will. He's probably thinking though, yeah, I'll get my GCSEs done and then it's sixth form college and surely everything will be better by then. Little does he know that he'll nearly be chucked out of sixth form for skipping lessons when the bullying doesn't stop. So much for that fresh start. He looks back on that moment, though, with a rueful smile, remembering the row he had with his mother, as that was pretty much the only time in that period when he spoke to her about the situation at school, and probably the only time he can remember ever raising his voice to his mother, when she finds out that he's not been attending college. And then there's the tears, when he finally tells her, after probably 5 years, all about this bullying. He's thankful looking back that he did finally pluck up the courage to say something, even though back then the law of the jungle in the playground was shut up and get on with it. He's thankful he went to school before the days of social media too, when he could at least escape to his bedroom when the bell went. And he's thankful for the life he's had since, all that he's achieved despite that dark shadow, or maybe because of it. Having those "you're not good enough" voices in his head, driving him to prove those bullies wrong perhaps, even though everything he's done he knows is never going to be quite enough. And now he stood in front of all you wonderful people, determined to turn the negative start to this story into a positive, because he knows, even though he's never met most of the people in this room before, and may never see many of them again, that he's in a safe space. Because he knows that we live in a different era, where it's okay to not be okay, where it's okay to take a sick day for mental health reasons as well as physical, where it's okay in the playground to not just shut up and get on with it. And perhaps most importantly, because he knows that he's not alone, that his story isn't unique, and certainly compared to others he's heard, it's fairly tame. But rather than beating himself up for not being good enough to have a better story, he gains strength from knowing he's part, and I'm going to go like this, of the mental health army, tackling those voices in our heads each day. I do appreciate it's a bit strange that I'm a compere and also a speaker today, but in my profession you become quite a fan of your own voice, even if the people listening don't always feel the same way. So I'm quite keen on using my vocal powers for good rather than evil. And that explains one of the many reasons why I'm keen to be here today and to talk until I'm told to shut up about mental health. I guess though, as I'm the compere, I can't really tell myself to shut up, so we could be here all day. We're not going to be here all day. But luckily, I've done enough acting and performing to be aware of the phrase, leave the audience wanting more. But I also know there are others who will be too shy to speak or will feel that no one will listen. So as well as being here for me, I'm here for them hopefully as well. Here to normalise talking about mental health, especially for us menfolk who have never really been encouraged to do so. Traditionally it's been seen, as we all know, as a sign of weakness. Well, personally, I'd rather be seen as weak, but be able to live my life with a loving family and friendship circle who would find the alternative to me talking an alternative that I'm not going to mention by name, but I think you know what I'm talking about, just too horrid to contemplate. For me, I didn't really start my conversation with mental health until probably around the time that Marcus Trescothick book came out, or at least until my 30s anyway. So I've hopefully plenty of time to make up for that now. I did talk to counsellors in my 20s, but if I'm being honest, I just figured I was one of those people that just had a miserable outlook on life and everything surrounding it. And despite that feeling on the inside, I was also one of those annoying people who just kept on grinning on the outside. Many people over the years have called me Smiler. Hence the title of this speech really, Behind the Painted Smile, which is a great song by the Isley Brothers, of course, and probably something the majority of people with depression can identify with. If in doubt, it's the old rule, isn't it? Look happy and people will just assume you're fine. But look up an acronym for FINE, which again I won't share now, and that will probably tell you the full story. And then for me, it happened. Just before I turned 30, I ran the New York Marathon, which was one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had in my life. My legs haven't quite recovered even now, I think, but an amazing experience. Only it didn't feel amazing. 3 days after coming back from running it, I was sat there in my bedroom, feeling every bit as bad as I had when I was that teenager. Flat, empty, close to tears. No, in fact, there probably were some tears. And for me to cry, let me tell you, it's very rare. Just ask anyone who's seen me at a funeral, when normally I'm the one having to be strong. I'm the one having to stand up and speak about a loved one, as public speaking, I guess, is something that I do. But that night was terrible. But like that row with my mother, on reflection, it was a turning point. As the morning after the night before, I got on the phone to my GP. And days later, I had a diagnosis. Andy, you probably have depression. Let's try and help and make it better. So at last for me, that dark shadow had a name. I wasn't just a miserable sod. In typical Andy style though, I probably posted the diagnosis on Facebook before I told my parents. But I can honestly say I'm incredibly glad that I did come out that way. Not one friend criticised the post, and several got in touch privately to say, I'm so glad you've done that. I'm kind of feeling the same. And this would have been nearly 10 years ago now, so we've obviously moved forward in that. So hopefully more and more people are doing that. And once I started talking, as I said, I've not really stopped. I've made YouTube videos, I've written for magazines on the subject. I've even made a guest appearance recently on national radio to try and tell my story. Even with all my broadcasting experience, I was definitely more scared being Andy from Aylesbury talking mental health than I've ever been being Andy Holmes from the BBC. But I did it, and you know what, I'd do it again if I'm ever lucky enough to be asked. And I do feel, that word lucky, that it's a privilege to have this platform today, and I'm sure the other speakers do too. It's not a privilege to live with depression. I wouldn't wish it on anyone, even those school bullies. And there are still days when all the talking in the world for me really doesn't make a dent. But ultimately, I'm privileged to live in a world now where we can be so open about this subject. And whoever you are in this room, whatever your story is, I strongly urge you to keep up the good work. As I think back to being a teenager in the 90s, and I wonder what would have happened if I'd talked earlier. Would my adult years have been happier? I guess I'll never know, but I'll leave you by saying, in 2018, keep listening to others, keep fighting your own battles, but remember we've no need to fight alone. And of course, just keep talking. Thank you. Of course, with all the other speakers, they sit down, so you stop talking, you stop clapping, but with me, obviously, I'm going to stay up here, so you don't have to keep clapping, but thank you. And I've got to say, before I introduce the next bunch, the first time I stood up in class, I can vividly remember, it was an English lesson in about year 9, and I read, I think we were going through a play, and I read out a speech from the play, and it felt like I was doing good, but as soon as I'd finished it, I said, can I sit down? And I ran back, because I just was so shy about getting up and speaking, and that was, I don't know, probably Shakespeare or something like that. But to come up here like these next lads are doing, I think is absolutely amazing. We've got the youth health champions who are coming up now to give their side of this particular story. So let's welcome onto the stage Ben Mayrick, Ben Wyatt and Stan McMurray.
Hi everyone, thank you very much Andy for the introduction. And we are Youth Health Champions from Sandringham School. My name's Stan.
I'm Ben.
And I'm also Ben.
Oh, sorry, this is the wrong PowerPoint. Jen, do you know where it is?
This one.
So our journey began back in 2016 when Debbie Roberts came into our school to talk to us about a new programme called the Youth Health Champion Programme. And essentially what this is a course that we have been working on since 2016 about mental health and particularly young people's mental health. So we took on this amazing opportunity after hearing Debbie Roberts come and speak to us in our assembly, and since then we have been learning about the vast and complex issues of mental health. Mental health is something that we all have, and we want to be promoting good mental health, and this course has kind of has facilitated that for us as we've become advocates for good mental health.
So when we started 2 years ago, we kind of came up with a few aims to something to strive for by the end of our course. We wanted to raise people's awareness of mental health and make sure that they understood what mental health actually was. And as it's not talked about a lot, some people are unsure of how to talk about it, and so hopefully by increasing their understanding they'll know what to do when they come across it. We wanted to share knowledge. In our course we learn about mental health. It will be mental health, physical and the social aspect. We wanted to learn about that ourselves and then share that knowledge with other people so that they can then be supported and know how to support as well. We wanted to decrease the negative stigma and to make sure, like Just Talk, that people don't suffer in silence and they don't have to bottle up their fears. And also to pave the way for other teens to help and support other people like we would for them.
So a little bit about what we do as Youth Health Champions. So we've learnt about all the three main areas of personal health. So that's mental, physical and social well-being of every individual. And it's a topic we've studied and realised the importance of. And we don't act as professionals at all, but we do act as a friendly face for people to talk to, and we're more than happy to listen to everyone. We're also, part of the course was to look at different places and websites we can signpost people. Part of the course was to contact them ourselves and assess each one. And at the end of the course, we aim to deliver a peer message to part of the community, and we can deliver this on anything. And it was a topic that interests us the most relating to mental health.
So there's a group of about 12 of us at Sandringham School, Youth Health Champions, but it's a programme that runs across Hertfordshire. We are keen to get more people involved, but these are just some of the reasons why that we got involved. So for me personally, I was really keen to foster a community at my school that felt comfortable talking about mental health, because there was a stigma around it, so that we can help to kind of collectively solve people's issues and kind of help them meet the needs of our peers. And I feel like this course has really helped to facilitate us and given us a lot of knowledge and information to help signpost people in need.
For me, I've always wanted to help people as much as possible. And before this course, initially, I had a really basic understanding of mental health, and I really didn't understand it. And that was definitely something affected by the stigma coming up through primary school. And through this course and the experiences I've had, I've realised not many people talk about it, like we all know, and it's something I wanted to change and get involved with.
I'm really interested in mental health and the psychology aspect of it, and I felt really strongly about how people should understand about that, and because it's not talked about a lot, that isn't the case. People don't understand, and I wanted to use the Youth Health Champions as an opportunity to broaden my chances to talk about it and help people and support to give my input into this. On the 23rd of November last year in 2017, at Sandringham School we held a mental health conference. For that we invited teachers, students and parents from anywhere, and they came in to listen to some of our key speakers such as Jake Mills, we had Professor Coleman, and if you saw in the video, there was Johnny Benjamin. And they talked about their personal experiences and all their knowledge about mental health to share to all of the teachers, parents and students. We held a panel as well, where we had all of our experts on mental health. They'd sit down and all the audience would prepare and ask them questions about what they felt was important to them so they could understand more on a personal scale. We had people from Saracens and Arsenal Academy, and they came in little workshops to help talk about body image and pressures to coincide with that. In between all of the work, we had a lot of workshops with the Saracens and Arsenal Academy, but also with all of our experts, which were split up into teachers, students and parents individually, so they could each get a feel for a different aspect of mental health, such as body image. We found it an incredible success. As you can see, this is the panel. And we got loads of positive feedback from all of them. Everyone really enjoyed it and wished for another one.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that the atmosphere was amazing. The keynote speeches and our panel there, the discussions were very interesting. And the feedback was all positive, and they said in their kind of questionnaires that we'd like to have one next year and even make it a 2-day course.
So one of the big first opportunities we had of Youth Health Champions was to give a talk and an appearance on Radio Verulam's Parent Show from 8 to 9 p.m. The aim of it was to talk to the parents that may be struggling with children that have their own mental health issues. And we realised that that can be just as affecting on them and how hard it can be to just know how to help a child in need. So both with the stress and pressure of exams, social media, and everyday life of being an average child creates a very difficult environment for everyone. And we felt like it was necessary to give something back to the community and present some help for the parents that may need it.
Okay, so another project that some of us have been involved with that's separate from the Youth Health Champion programme is something called the Empathy Project. You may have seen the stall outside. And essentially what this is, it's another amazing and unique opportunity for young people in Hertfordshire to get involved with. With the traditional training in mental health, the Empathy Project gives teens the opportunity to help in the front lines in A&E in both Watford and Leicester General Hospitals. Since A&E can be kind of a scary and daunting place for young people, our role is essentially to be there to help other teens and young people who may need it, to help them and make sure that they're comfortable, whether that be in the form of talking and listening to them, getting them something to drink, or even playing cards. I think it's a really useful and valuable thing to do, and after working on it for the past 2 months, I've really seen the benefit of it. It is a pilot project, and we would really like to carry this on further. Another thing that we can do is provide a social prescription for teens that come into A&E, which is essentially a pack full of mental health services and information available to them, and we can tailor it to their individual needs.
We'd like to talk about some of what we think are the most important factors of a youth's teenage years, one of which is social media. We know this is split mostly between adults and children. Adults feeling as if it's a negative impact due to all the cyberbullying, blackmail and all the body image such as on Instagram and all of that. However, we also understand that the teenagers, they like social media as well, not only for communication, but we feel like it is a way to promote valuable positive messages such as just talk. And even though that it may not be a good thing at times, that it can be used in a good way.
So another thing that we spoke about on the radio show that's particularly relevant for teenagers and their mental health is the pressure of exams. So it's perhaps one of the biggest struggles for teens. And from an early stage in one's education, exams are presented as something that will define your career and potentially your life. And we're trying to reduce this stigma It's very difficult to confront this, as a lot of teens see school as just an exams factory that you go through and you're just given kind of a set of grades at the end. And when pressured to strive for success and for the highest grades, students are likely to overwork themselves and stress out hugely, and this really impacts the imbalance of their social, mental and physical well-being. However, with the right mindset and headspace, students can help themselves to achieve their goals, and that's what we were talking about on the radio show, is about applying techniques and philosophies to kind of help you and maintain a good work-life balance in order for you to achieve success.
So as teens, there's many things that change as you go through life, and a big area can be all kinds of relationships that we have. And whilst growing and changing both physically and mentally, this can easily affect the people we choose to hang around with, be close to and share our lives with. And witnessing such changes with other people can also have a personal effect on us, and it can really feel easy to feel a sense of guilt, confusion and be upset over things, and not understanding why someone maybe might not choose to be friends with us or start to hang around with other people. And this is something that's quite easy to notice when you're at school with someone. One day they start hanging around with different people and you don't understand why this is, and it can also affect your own personal self-esteem and confidence, which leads to more depressive feelings.
So another issue for teenagers is substance misuse. And modern neuroscience tells us that as teenagers, as our brains are developing, we are increasingly more susceptible to temptation. Of course, that can involve alcohol and drugs. It's a very common occurrence and theme in the adolescent years, as most have experienced misuse or witnessed it happen to friends or peers. It can have a serious impact on studies and relationships, etc. As many people see it as cool or socially acceptable to drink at parties, etc., or take drugs. But as youth health champions, what we want to do is advocate positive health messages that people are being responsible and that they know how much that they're drinking if they are drinking alcohol. One of our peers, Freddie, who's another youth health champion, did a peer message to a group of year 10s on alcohol misuse, which I think was very interesting, and just making sure that if people are going to drink, that they know how much that they're taking so that they can be safe and responsible.
So going into why we did the talk on the radio, we definitely realised the effect that mental illness in teens can have on parents. And as a parent, again, it can be very easy to feel guilty and confused over things a child may say or do. And sometimes it can feel, as a parent, that you're responsible to help your own child. And sometimes we find that this may not be the case. Like just talk and just listening, that can have more of an impact than just trying to seek out advice for them, because it can sometimes cause frustration and make things worse in some cases. And we would definitely ask of parents to just stay really resilient. And also there's help for parents to seek out to help them know and understand what they can do to help their own child.
I know all of us three really enjoyed the radio show, and hopefully we'll be able to have another opportunity to have another hour on Radio at Verulam. One of our visions probably will be to go back on there sometime. But ultimately, we do want to raise awareness of mental health, and to make sure that people can just talk and not bottle up their emotions. Another vision we have is definitely to do another mental health conference, whether it's at Sandringham or not, or 1 day or 2 day course, because of all the positive feedback and how it's affected everyone in such a good way. We really would like to do another one. We also will deliver another peer message sometime in the future to a peer group in our community, in our school. And also to create drop-in centres so that people can just talk and make it easy and available for people.
So this is actually something that we've started recently, where students can come in and speak to kind of sixth form students about their needs, or just if they want to have a chat, and we can kind of signpost to other information such as Couth, etc., that we think that they may find useful. So thank you very much for listening. We hope that you found some of what we said useful and can maybe take back to your institutions. Thank you very much.
What about that, eh? How do you guys feel now it's over? Quite relieved. Well, that was illuminating stuff. Ben, and Stan, that was brilliant. A few things that I picked out. Loving the fact that you like radio. That's a solid start. Don't try and come for my job just yet, but no, it's really good to see, and fingers crossed you can get to do some more of that sort of stuff. We've got a health show at Three Counties Radio, actually, so it could be that down the line we can do something there. I also think everyone in this room, believe it or not, knows what it's like to be a teenager. It may be in the dark and distant past, but we know what it's like, and we know how hard. I mean, I thought it was really scary. I don't know about anyone else. The things that happen at that period of life, some of them good, some of them bad. And for you guys today, as has been mentioned already, with the social media around and the fact that you can't shut your door, it's there, it's constantly. The fact that you guys are helping and championing in your school is absolutely brilliant. I love the fact that one of you said you were really interested in mental health, in the same way that you'd say I'm really interested in playing football. It's a passionate thing, and I think it's good to see that. I didn't know much about mental health, but I wanted to find out more. That is so encouraging. Some of us in this room will be lucky enough not to have a mental health story, but the fact that we're all getting together and trying to listen and find out more is brilliant. And we had workshops. We'd like to have one next year and make it a 2-day course. Even better. Fantastic stuff. Give them another small round of applause. That's our youth health champions who've done a fantastic job. We are going to possibly break for a coffee in a few minutes' time because we probably all need a little bit of a comfort break. But before that, we had the 3 lads up just now, and that was strength in numbers. But we've got a lad who's going to come up here now on his own. I spoke to him before. He's done quite a bit of public speaking before. So for him, this is going to be an absolute walk in the park. But make some noise for a very brave young man from the Welwyn Hatfield Youth Council. It's George Walker.
Good afternoon. My name is George Walker. I'm 13 years old and attend Chancellor School. I joined the Welwyn Hatfield Youth Council in September 2017. I'd like to start by thanking everyone for giving me such an amazing chance to talk in front of you all. The Welwyn Hatfield Youth Council are a team of young people who discuss, debate and take action on issues that matter to us. Mental health is a key priority for us and has been for a number of years now. We've been very busy recently promoting the hashtag Just Talk campaign. Welwyn Hatfield Borough Council sponsored some social media adverts which has proven to be very successful in our borough. We have recently had meetings with the Borough Council's Cabinet members and visited Houses of Parliament with our local MP Grant Shapps. I've also had the chance to attend the British Youth Council meeting, which was attended by youth councils all over the country. We discussed many topics like Brexit, and I did a talk to the group about the hashtag Just Talk campaign. We have produced a short video showing our visit to the Houses of Parliament, which I'm going to show you, and as you can see, we asked Grant Shapps to give a short speech about healthy coping strategies.
Today, Youth Council's going to Parliament! Parliament, and we're moving.
Guys, smile.
Cheese!
That was about 2 or 3 years ago. London, Westminster Station, and we're on our way to Parliament. Hi, Ria! Hi! Say hi, Molly!
To meet Grant Shapps. I am. He's a very nice person. Just don't.
campaign, and my coping mechanism is why it's taking a minute that was currently left to calm down.
I support #JustTalk because I think improving mental health for young people is very important, especially with the world that we live in today.
Hi, I'm Grant Shapps. I'm Welland Hatfield's Member of Parliament. I'm here today with the Welland Hatfield Youth Council, and I'm helping to promote the #JustTalk campaign, which is a fantastic campaign to encourage people to talk to their friends, talk about their emotions, and explain that it is a strong thing to do. And I thought I'd tell you something that I do if I'm stressed or there's something which is troubling me. My personal coping strategy, I write it down. I write it down in my diary. I've done this for years, and I just make a note of the thing which is maybe annoying me. Occasionally I do a column on what's good and what's bad, and then I come to a better conclusion. And by doing that, it's a way of talking, and it's a way of talking to myself really, I'm just writing it down. Another great strategy, of course, is to talk to your friends and tell them, and you're always amazed when something's troubling you and you share it with somebody else. It is true, the problem shared is a problem halved. So that's my strategy. Good luck with the #JustTalk campaign, something I really strongly support.
Hi, we are the Welland Hatfield Youth Council and we support
#JustTalk!
I also personally took a great interest in the topic and therefore decided to involve my classmates, who too found it a crucial campaign, and so we amicably decided to make some videos.
We are
8 more, and we support the #JustTalk campaign
Because we
think it's a good cause for us to support #JustCause.
I feel that this is a key campaign, as I'm aware that young people, including myself, feel that talking about their problems is not easy. And in general, my classmates and I find it much easier to sort things out ourselves by trying to forget them, or as the common phrase says, bottling them up. Knowing about this campaign has shown my friends and I the amount of people we can talk to and where to find support and resources online. I would like to think that this campaign will go nationwide so everyone knows how many people they can talk to and how many people want to listen. Thank you.
Fantastic stuff, George. Thank you so much for coming up here and talking to us today. That's brilliant. In my job, I get to speak to quite a lot of the politicians, and sometimes it's good news, sometimes it's bad news. It was great to see Grant Shapps there. I know we've got Charles Walker as well, the MP for Broxbourne, who I think has stood up in Parliament and talked about mental health issues before. And Bim Afalami, the MP for Hitchin and Harpenden, he told me when I first met him about a scheme called the GRIT Project in Hertfordshire, which is helping young girls gain resilience when they've been through eating disorders and things. So it's good to see the school children right the way up to the politicians and everyone in between getting behind the mental health message. And we have one more case study before we go for a break. Who in here has heard of Time to Change, the charity? They're one of many fantastic charities in this country. We've just had the Time to Talk week, which I think was a couple of weeks ago, talking all about and getting us all, as we know, talking. So we've got coming up onto the stage now, and it should be in my notes. Yes, it is. We should have a Luke Watkin from Time to Change to come up here and talk about his work this afternoon. Luke Watkin.
Before I start, I'd like to say absolutely amazing to the young men who spoke just before me. Honestly, for me, that was really incredible to see. It's I'd give you another round of applause if I could. I suppose for me, it's easier to start with my story of mental health by going with my diagnosis. I have schizoaffective mood disorder, which, aside from being a mouthful to say, affects me by having highly negative auditory hallucinations alongside really sharp periods of depression. My very first psychotic experience happened when I was in year 9. I remember I'd stayed after school to work on a geography project. Now, I can't tell you what that geography project was about, which probably gives you some idea of my grade, but I remember walking home through the corridor, and suddenly the corridor just erupted into noise. Sounded like metal on metal, sort of like a train brake. I didn't know what was happening. I just sort of ran out of the corridor and pretty much ran all the way home, just confused. I didn't really know that was going to be the start of a very long road with my mental health. Things got progressively worse. More these noises, bangs and screeches became sort of almost like animal hisses. Eventually just hearing my own name being whispered in crowds or being yelled when I was alone. I remember trying to talk to my teachers at the time, and I was sort of hand-waved away. Why would I talk? Why would I say such rubbish? Why would I say such horrible things? I should be stronger. That affected me pretty deeply. I started to realise that actually, why wasn't I stronger? Why couldn't I be like my father, like my brothers, who just seemed to just have it all together? So I decided I was going to. I was going to keep it all to myself. No one else had to know. This was going to be my burden. I convinced myself how brave I was being, how I was making the right choice, as I heard that negative voice in my head whisper that I was a liar. This continued. This only got worse. The voice then started to sound like my friends, like my family. I found I couldn't even trust those around me. For me, hearing something that was clearly not my parents use their voice to tell me how could they love a failure like me was something that took me years to get over, and thankfully I've made peace with it now. With this, I struggled through my GCSEs. I struggled through my A-levels. But when I reached university for the first year, it was suddenly like it was gone. Suddenly I had this freedom I'd never felt before, and I felt like everything was going to be fine. That was not the case. As I moved into my second year, the voice slowly crept back into my life. This time almost crueler, harder to deal with. My friends were just pushed to the wayside. I couldn't afford to, in my head, to spend that time with them. As my grades slowly started to plummet, I remember my tutor offering me help. And at that time, I wasn't ready to accept that I needed help. So I pushed it away. Eventually, I dropped out of university. I started to miss too much and my grades got too low. But in my head, I couldn't afford to let my family see that. So I claimed I was still attending university. I lied for almost a year, pretending that everything was fine, weaving stories about the great grades I was getting, when in reality, I was sitting in a room with the voice in my head. Eventually, this led to a very dark period of my mental health, where I blacked out. I went missing for 24 hours, and I have no idea what I have, and I have no memory of it. And personally, I think that's for the best. I remember coming to, bruised and pretty confused about what had happened, but that was the starting point of my recovery. Through this, my friends and family realised that I was unwell, and I needed support. And for the first time in my life, I was willing to accept that I needed it. I was then put in contact with the early intervention program, and through them met a brilliant coordinator, people who really understood, and I began a course of medication, which, though at points pretty tough, was never as bad as what had come before. I started being more open. I was encouraged to. I spoke to my friends and my family more about how I was feeling, how these things could just creep up on you. And though I had some negative responses from people, the overwhelming part was that it was positive. People wanted to know, people wanted to support you. To my family, I don't think I can ever stress enough how much their patience and their understanding has meant to me. To my friends, be it a friend from Norwich who I could chat to at 3 a.m, a friend in Welwyn Garden who I'm pretty sure has scoured the internet and sent me every meme. But or just ones closer to home, ones who've managed to drag me outside, make me go for a run, make me go to the gym, go out for a coffee, something. Those little moments helped more than I could ever really stress. Through those conversations, I gained new confidences. I've actually, as I said about running, took part in Tough Mudder, which I ran on behalf of not only my peer group but also Rethink. And Tough Mudder, being a 12-mile assault course, is definitely recommend it. I've got my 4th coming up in June, so it hasn't put me off yet. I really can't stress how much this conversation, which we're having today, really means a lot. How it really changes everything. For me, almost 4 years ago, to be up here in front of all of you is just something that I couldn't even have thought about. To be here today in front of so many strong people making a change is brilliant. And I really hope the conversation that is going on doesn't stop. Speaking of that, I'm going to stop talking. Thank you very much for listening.
Wow, so refreshing to have another honest voice up here talking. Luke, thank you so much for coming here today and telling a story that I think we can all get something from that, whatever it is, if we listen to things like that. And the more we listen, I think the more we do gain some strength. But I think we perhaps also need a little bit of strength for a break now, just to take our minds off things for a few minutes. So if we can have 10 minutes for a bit of a coffee. I believe the coffee stuff will be out in reception, and then we'll gather at about, let's say, 3:05, and we'll return then. So thank you very much for now. Right, how are we all doing? Are we all ready for a resumption? I hope you found the coffee break restful and are ready for, I think we've got a couple more speakers. Then we're going to have, because normally on these things you have any questions at the end of your speech, so we haven't actually got that for each speaker, but what we're going to do instead is we're going to have what will probably be quite a short questions and answer session in about 15-20 minutes time, and then we get to that table planning activity I mentioned earlier on, where we're trying to improve the future of mental health for boys in Hertfordshire. So that's what we've got to come. We're still hoping, fingers crossed, to finish by about 4:30. If we don't, it's my fault. Don't blame Jen at all. She's told me to say that, but no. What we will do first of all, though, we do have our keynote speaker coming up very soon. That's a chap called Andy Bell, who is from the Centre for Mental Health. He's been regaling me with tales of living in Norfolk. I don't know whether he'll have time for those later on, but he will be here to talk mental health in a few minutes. Before that, though, I don't know whether you're aware of this. I am, because of the politics that I cover. There's a green paper at the moment on mental health. I think, is that part of the social care, or are they separate ones? They're separate ones. There you go. So I don't really know that much at all. But someone who does is Deborah Shepherd, who is the CAMS Schools Link Manager, and she's going to come up to tell us all about it now.
Thanks, Andy. I don't think I know particularly more than anyone else about this, but I think I'm the only person silly enough to put my hand up and say, I'll do that. Okay, so my name is Deborah Shepherd. I am one of 2 school CAMS Link managers employed by the clinical commissioning groups in Hertfordshire. Our role is really to support schools as we move through the CAMS transformation process. And we thought it might be really helpful for you just to get a really brief overview of what it says in the green paper and where we are in relation to some of that in Hertfordshire. So, the key proposals, as set out in the green paper, similar to schools having a designated senior person for safeguarding, they're suggesting that schools also have a mental health lead. They're also suggesting that there will be new services working more closely with schools, and where those new services are operating, that there will be an expectation that specialist mental health services will be able to see children and young people quicker. Some areas will be sought to fast track some of these proposals, but certainly over the next 5 years there's an expectation that between 1/5 and 1/4 of all areas will have these proposals operational. Significantly, there is funding available to fund these proposals. Everybody says. Okay, so just to give you a bit more detail about those 3 main proposals, schools are very very aware that we have various different lead roles in schools. We have designated senior person for safeguarding, we also have autism leads now, and we know this is a model that works really, really well. So by giving one person some time and some training to support them to build on their own expertise, to be able to support other colleagues in school around how to support children and young people's mental health. Also to build relationships with services, build up the pathways between them. This is a role that could really work. The government are also allocating funding and investigating training to support that person in their role. In Hertfordshire, we already have more than 400 schools that have nominated someone to be their mental health lead, and that's been the case for a number of years in Hertfordshire. As a result of that, we've got a very robust one-day course for those mental health leads to support them in their role, as well as an online toolkit full of different resources to help that person to perform their functions in school. We know that the whole school approach is really important to underpinning everything that happens, so we have put together, looking at all of the documentation from other organisations, a really robust whole school approach, so that we know if a school was meeting all of those criteria, they would have an outstanding whole school approach. Alongside that, we've also produced a self-review tool so schools can see where they are in relation to those standards and maybe develop an action plan about how to implement further improvements in school. For our schools that already have excellent practice, or once they reach that stage, we are going to be launching a kite mark just to give those schools recognition of the valuable work that they are doing. We've also been working on improving various processes to support communication between schools and specialist services, and also a smaller project to help schools to collect data about what's working well for students in their schools around mental health provision. The new services that the government are proposing will mainly be delivering CBT-based interventions. They will be focusing on low mood, anxiety, supporting challenging behaviour alongside the broader family unit. We have an existing model that's fairly similar to this idea in Hertfordshire at the moment. Hopefully people will have heard of the children's wellbeing practitioners that are currently cited within Families First Early Help and working very closely with our Step 2 early intervention services. We're really hopeful that's a model in Hertfordshire that can be expanded to help more young people. So, many services in Hertfordshire are already working extremely hard to meet targets around the first access point where they have their initial assessment. But the government ambition is that where these mental health teams are in place, young people will be able to access interventions within 28 days. So throughout the CAMHS transformation over the last couple of years, we have seen quite significant improvements in waiting times across a range of different services. We've been able to extend our crisis provision. Young people now have access to online counselling through COOTH, which hopefully everybody's heard about. There's been an increase in the number of children and young people accessing Step 2, our early intervention service. The average wait to the first appointment is 3 weeks, to intervention 5 weeks. Quite an astonishing achievement given the amount of young people that need support. And on our new early intervention service, which is currently out to tender, will be starting in October this year, so that's very exciting as well. Some other things that the government have mooted in their green paper are thinking about utilising the PSHE curriculum more so that young people can learn about mental health, well, mental well-being specifically. Thinking about how to utilise Ofsted and initial teacher training more effectively, increasing peer support, also acknowledging that more work needs to be done around understanding the impact of social media on children and young people's mental health, as well as understanding better the needs of 16 to 25-year-olds. So there's a whole bunch of other things out there, but this is just some of the key headlines. So if you feel passionate about any of the proposals that have been set out in the Green Paper, we are putting in a combined response across Hertfordshire. If you'd like to contribute to that, I would advise you to go and have a look at the consultation questions online to see if there's anything there that you think you could helpfully respond to, and to contact us with that information. We'll very happily facilitate that for you. And I have been asked just to remind you about some local resources. Various people today have spoken about the Healthy Young Minds in Herts website. This is something that we're really hoping will become people's go-to resource in Hertfordshire. So whether you're a young person, a parent, a professional, or a member of staff working in a school, you'll find resources here to support you. So really important website, but I specifically want to let you know about some resources that are available on that website for schools. We have information about the training that my colleague Breda and I have been delivering to schools over the last year and going forward. The mental health first aid course, which a number of people will have heard of. We've also been supporting people with anxiety, self-harm, so training courses around those kind of things. All of the lesson plans for the Just Talk campaign are on this website. So if you haven't already accessed them, please do. That's where you will find them. We have a mental health lead toolkit, which really does include everything that the mental health lead will need. If you go on there and you find that there's something missing that you would want on there, we'll make it for you. So just get in touch. But it includes things like training slides, video clips, explainers about different things, what happens when I make a referral, what happens after that, what is SPA, the single point of access, etc. Referral forms, lots of different resources. And I just want to show you a couple of those because I'm conscious that people like to know what services and support is available to children and young people. So I'm going to just signpost you to a couple of those resources in particular. Just before I kind of click off this and go on to the online, these are our contact details for Breda and I. We really like to hear from people, so please do contact us if you have any questions, ideas, suggestions, comments, or anything that you need support with, particularly if you work in a school. So if I just can show you, these are the Just Talk resources on the website, which I obviously won't go through, but Jen has explained to you there's a good deal of different things there. This is the Mental Health Leads Toolkit, which you do need to register to use. We have negotiated permission for certain resources that people want us to just share locally. So if you work in a school or a professional supporting children and young people, you can register to access that website, and then you'll be able to access all of these wonderful resources. So there really are a lot of things on here, quality assurance tools to support you with various things, contact details for various services. But there's a couple of things that I specifically wanted to show you that you will find on here. One of them is this document, which we kind of lovingly refer to as CAMS on a page. That's effectively what it is, but that's not really what it's called. It's called Matching Need to Intervention Table. But here, this just gives you an overview, and it's very difficult to read where you are, so I would like you to go and have a look at this document in the flesh if you can. We've tried to give you an idea of what presentations you might see at different levels, and then what might be the appropriate intervention for those children and young people. And then in the last column, you'll just see a whole bunch of hyperlinks to the different services that would provide those interventions. So whilst we can't capture everybody, everyone's individual needs on one side of A4, just gives you a bit of an idea, a starting point to think about what needs am I seeing, what level of service do I need. So that's that one. And we've also got this fantastic signposting guide, which Spot the Signs Children and Young People's project have developed with a group of us recently. These are things that I know some schools have put on their websites. Some schools are printing off and handing to pupils or making them available through libraries and reception and things like that. But you'll just see from the contents page, the breadth of information that's available in there. So a nice little A5 booklet that you can access to give to your children and young people. So I'll stop there because we're running out of time. And obviously, if you do have any questions about any of these, please do email. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much there, Deborah, for that. I'm sure we all could take something from that. But we move now on to our keynote speaker. Now, this is a chap who has been with the Centre for Mental Health since 2002. Previous to that, he worked for the King's Fund, where he began as Director of Communications, becoming Deputy Chief Executive in 2009. He's a member of the Mental Health Policy Group and was chair of the Mental Health Alliance between 2006 and 2008. His name is Andy Bell. He's carried out research on the implementation of national mental health policies and on local mental health needs assessments too. So without further ado, Andy Bell.
Thank you very much. It's very nice to be here, partly because I like being in Hertfordshire, and I'm normally spent walking in Hertfordshire, so it's funny to be here for work. That's slightly weird, but I'll deal with that. It's also great to be in Hertfordshire because I work at Centre for Mental Health. We're a national charity. We've been around for a number of years, and our role is about doing and using research to really bring about change in mental health policy and practice to reduce inequalities and improve mental health for everyone. One of the things we did a couple of years ago was work with Hertfordshire to develop some of the thinking around the transformation of children and young people's mental health support. And it is truly outstanding to hear in the previous presentation from what's happened in that time and some of the changes that are going on here. So it's really heartening to hear that. I shall be kind of whispering in people's ears, would you like to blog for us at some point soon? So just to be warned. And I really would encourage you to respond to the Green Paper. A Green Paper is a consultation paper, which means that their thoughts aren't fixed. We've had some thoughts about the Green Paper, and while we like some of it, we think it falls short of being what we'd expect for a really comprehensive plan around children and young people's mental health in schools. So do make your views known, do welcome what's good in it, do encourage them to do better. I didn't tell you that. So I think my role here today, or what I was asked to do, is come and say a little bit about what could be more exciting on the middle of an afternoon, what the evidence says about children and young people's mental health, and some of the things that might be useful just to kind of throw into the mix. In a sense, what you've heard already is so much more important, which is about personal accounts and experience, and I cannot seek to improve upon and follow that, but hopefully some of the facts and figures you'll hear will hopefully coalesce very nicely with what Luke and the others were telling you about earlier, and keep those things in mind, keep those stories in mind. It's really important. So here we go. One of the first questions we often get asked is, well, what do you mean by mental health? And it's a good question, isn't it? And if we all tried to define it, we'd all come out with something different. So how we think about it is that, in a sense, at any one time, any young person, and this applies to somebody of any age, in terms of their mental well-being, their emotional well-being, call it what you like, use whatever term you feel most comfortable with, will be somewhere between pretty good, and most of us most days will be feeling okay. But some of us will be in different ends of this spectrum, and for many people, they may be okay. They might not have a diagnosable mental illness that you can put a label on, but they might be just about coping with life, and they might be on the edges of really struggling. And then some people really will be struggling with their mental health and having a really bad day, and others will have something which means that they need specialist care and support from a health service. And all of us can be anywhere on that spectrum on any given day. And that's really important to understand, because mental health is something actually we all own. We've all got it to one degree or another. Some people have really, really serious problems a lot of the time. Others will have brief episodes of being unwell. But we're all somewhere on that, and we all share it. It's something that is part of every single one of us. And that will become relevant again in a minute, as you will see shortly. So what do we know from the basic facts and figures? Well, by the time a child leaves primary school, always a happy day in a child's life, about 1 in 5 will have had some kind of serious mental health difficulty by the day they leave primary school, by about the age of 11. So this isn't something that's by and large happening to other people. It's not a minority issue. You know, this is 1 in 5 children by the age of 11. Across the whole of our lifetimes, we think about 2/3 of us will have a mental health condition that puts us in the red end of that spectrum at some point in our lives. Some people for a very long time, some people will live for their whole lives with difficulties, others will have a difficulty just once. Interestingly, among younger children, boys are twice as likely as girls to have a mental health problem that someone notices. And if you come from the poorest 20% of families, you're an astonishing 4 times more likely than someone from one of the wealthiest 20% of families to have a mental health difficulty during the younger part of childhood. So there are huge inequalities here, and the inequalities we see and observe in other ways also apply to mental health as well. This, believe it or not, is an infographic of 1,000 children, and my very patient colleague was very kindly, when I said, can you do a picture of 1,000 children, and very patiently put 1,000 children on here. The reason we've done this is not to show off, but to really try and get an idea of what kind of support would you expect in a population, and 1,000 children is about the size of a secondary school, isn't it? So that's really handy. To look after the mental health of our children, and remember the spectrum earlier. So these are about the numbers of children who would apply to different bits of the spectrum. So the good news is most of the children here are in this rather drab grey colour, which means that they're generally all right. They're doing okay today. On any given day, their mental health is generally all right. They're not particularly at risk of poor mental health, but you'll see a significant number, about 175 in this population of 1,000 kids. Imagine 175 kids if a fire test goes off. That's the best way to imagine a whole secondary school, isn't it? Everyone's out there on the playing field because there's been a fire drill. 175 of those kids will have a serious risk of poor mental health for a number of reasons, and we can talk about the risk factors for poor mental health later if we have time. They're not necessarily ill today, but they're just about coping. And there's always a danger that if things go more difficult for them, they might become really quite seriously unwell and take those difficulties into adult life. I'm getting overly animated and whacking the microphones. This does tend to happen to me when I'm doing this. And then you'll have a group of around about 70 children, or 7% if you like percentages, who have a common mental health problem. So that might be depression, it might be anxiety, it might be serious behavioural problems. So they've got something you can stick a label on, and it's really good for those kids to get support for their mental health, and things like counselling and COOth, really important for that kind of group. And then you've got those who are kind of labelled here in red and whatever that deep maroon colour is, who have really quite serious problems that need specialist help from specialist child and adolescent mental health services, things like eating disorders. And that's your population. You'll notice there's a green ridge around the edge, and that's because we think, and the evidence suggests, that every single child, no matter where they are on that spectrum, every single young person should be supported to enjoy good well-being, and that there is no child and young person who shouldn't get things like social and emotional learning opportunities in the classroom. So remember that thing about making mental health a part of PSHE lessons. There is no child who can't benefit from that, no matter what their well-being is like today, no matter whether it's really great or really terrible. And that's why we need to be doing that universally, to protect and promote all children's mental health and well-being, so no one leaves school without having had that experience. End of that bit of the lecture. So what do we know about what happens as a result of childhood mental health problems? Well, they're really serious. We know that any child who has a mental health difficulty during their formative years is more likely as an adult to have a mental health difficulty again. So there's a long, long shadow. It doesn't just happen once and then go away. Most adults who have some kind of mental health diagnosis as grown-ups first experienced it during their childhood. And it also tends to affect a whole range of a person's life experiences. So having a mental health problem in childhood can affect your chances of doing well at school, in the labour market, in your family relationships. All sorts of things are affected by mental health during childhood. So what can we do about that? Because it's really important we don't just get lost in the doom and gloom of this. Well, the place to start, of course, is during pregnancy. Because a child's chances of having good or poor mental health start very, very early, from the first spark of life. Even in the womb, you can have your mental health and well-being affected by what's going on for your mother. And we know that poor mental health in women during pregnancy and in the first year of life has a huge effect on a child's health and well-being, as well as being incredibly distressing for the mother and family members. The really crucial thing here is about identifying problems early, and making sure that every health visitor, every midwife, every GP knows how to talk to women during pregnancy and in the time after about their mental health, make sensitive inquiries, and make sure they refer them to really good quality help as soon as possible. Sadly, this doesn't often happen in the real world. Many women are afraid to disclose having difficulties. They think that makes them a bad mother, or that they'll be judged, or their kids will be taken away. And many health professionals don't feel confident in having that conversation. That really has to change. There are solutions, again, just making sure we begin to take away the stigma of mental health difficulties for young mothers, and we really train up GPs and health visitors and all the rest in knowing how to do that and make sure the help's available, of course, as quickly as possible. And then we know that after a child is born, in the first few years, there's the really important thing about healthy attachment to their parent, that having a warm relationship with the folks you live with, sensitive parenting, consistent boundary setting are really important to good mental health and well-being in young kids. These are the things that begin to protect you, act as a buffer against the tough things in your life. And dads and other parents are just as important as mothers as well. And there's growing evidence about the things that dads do as well and partners can do. First of all, if a mother is experiencing difficulties during pregnancy, maybe her partner can be the person who helps to kind of stabilize things and get them help quickly, give them just a bit more kind of protection and support. Very often, dads, particularly the way they play with their kids, can help them to kind of explore the world a bit more and go back out into the world. And it doesn't matter if you're living with or not living with your father, there is something about having a good co-parenting relationship between parents that really protects children and helps them to understand the world in a more comforting and consistent way. So again, when we're looking at supporting parents, we often think straight away about mums. We need to think about dads as well. And things like father-friendly employment practices may not seem like a mental health intervention, but they could be. They could be really important, and supporting families that have separated to make sure that they maintain those good relationships with the kids. One of the things that often surprises people is that the most important mental health difficulty in terms of later life effects for children is serious behavioural problems, and very often behavioural problems are not even seen as a mental health issue. It's seen as a disciplinary issue, it's seen as a naughty child, it's seen as a troubled child. It's not seen as a sign of distress, and yet we know for the majority of children the way they exhibit distress and difficulty is in their behaviour. And so a child with consistently poor behaviour is extremely at risk of a lot of bad things happening in later life. Particularly the kind of 6% doesn't sound very much, but that's more than 1 in 20. For anyone that's good at maths, they might be able to tell me what it actually is, 1 in, but you know, let's say 1 in 20 or so. That's quite a lot of kids in every school, and people know who the kids are who have consistent behavioural problems. It's fairly obvious, isn't it? They're the people that have the poorest chances in life, and we really need to start making sure we help those. Here's a fancy infographic that we produced that shows the effects of early behavioural problems. I'm assuming these slides will be made available, so you don't need me to read all them out, because that will be very boring. So what do? We need to make sure there's access to really good quality parenting programs to help those families whose children are having difficulties with their behaviour, just to settle them and to help them to manage their kids' behaviour in a way that will really have a lifetime of benefits for them and everybody else. And we need to do those as they're intended. Cutting corners on things that help to protect our mental health and well-being can be a really disastrous thing to do. We've got to do those things as they were supposed to be produced and make them really easy to get to. But of course, a lot of the discussion here has been about schools, and so it should be. There is no better place to promote good mental health and well-being than schools. Part of that is because it's a place young people spend a lot of time, like it or not like it. And partly it's because going to school is either going to help or hinder your mental health. Schools affect our mental health one way or another anyway. So thinking that when we're talking about mental health in schools, we're trying to create another burden is entirely missing the point. Schools have an influence on a child and indeed on staff's mental health one way or another. So isn't it better that we try and make that a positive influence than a negative one? And there are negative influences, and particularly bullying. That is probably the biggest cause of poor mental health after difficulties at home in early life. So we've really got to look at how we tackle bullying and make that an absolute priority. And I think there's a growing concern about school stress as well. An interesting little anecdote, I haven't quite formed my way through yet, but the last year of primary school we know is incredibly important before that transition to secondary. And yet most of what happens in that last year of primary school is being prepped for SATs. And the huge amount of pressure we put on 11-year-olds to do well in their SATs. Is that the best thing to do just before we send them off to the big world of secondary school? I wonder. So what do we do about it? Whole school approach has already been talked about, and this seems to be where the evidence takes us. That sometimes what happens is someone gets very interested in mental health and say, well, we'll teach it on the curriculum, or we'll have an anti-bullying program, or we'll get a counsellor in. Those are all really good things to do, but if you do just one of them, it doesn't work. Having a whole school approach is about making the culture of the entire school mental health friendly and supportive. So it's about putting it on the curriculum, definitely do that. It's about having effective approaches to preventing bullying and dealing with it. It's definitely about having access to counselling. And in primary schools, there's 1 or 2 places that are now offering parents counselling through the school because it's a much less stigmatising place to go to than somewhere marked mental health on the door. So there's definitely something about providing a whole range of supports within the school that promote the mental health and remember the well-being of the staff as well, so that we're not just doing all this stuff for the young people and then forgetting the effect it has on teachers and others. But there are some young people who face particular risks of poor mental health, and again, any approach to looking at this issue really needs to understand that and begin to look at how we can support those who do risk the greatest inequalities. So we know children who get bullied have poor mental health, that's really remarkably obvious, but also those who bully. And remember the link with behavioural problems in young kids. And those who are at biggest risk of all are those who both bully and get bullied. So again, this begins to tell you who are the people we should be concerned about and thinking about and offering really good help to. Children whose parents have poor mental health. That's not because parents with mental health problems are bad parents. It's because we need to offer a little bit some more support to someone who has a mental health difficulty, who is also a parent, to be the very best parent they can. Children who are affected by neglect, violence and maltreatment. Any child who is looked after by the council or of concern, again, it almost has to be a presumption that there will be a need for emotional support for those children and young people. But also think about those that have physical disabilities and health problems. Think about those from LGBT communities. I don't think that's because being gay or lesbian makes you more likely to have poor mental health. I think it's probably linked to bullying. And we also know those from some black and minority ethnic communities have heightened risks, those with autism, learning difficulties. There's a big long list in a research report we produced, and I brought a few copies of the summary, which I'll leave somewhere before I go. It's worth knowing who those young people are who are particularly at risk. So I think looking now at the kind of older age group, and then I will shut up soon, I absolutely promise, because you'll be bored to tears otherwise. We know there are growing concerns, while a lot of the focus has been about young men, about young women. The latest prevalence survey would suggest the biggest growth in poor mental health is among young women aged 16 to 24. So we need to look at what's going on there. We need to understand why it is young people, particularly teenagers, don't find traditional forms of support particularly attractive. Why it is that they feel stigma particularly keenly. The notion of anything to do with mental health is a real difficulty in terms of seeking help. But here's an interesting thing. When young people are worried about their mental health, they generally go to 1 or 2 places, and we can test this out with those who are younger than me here, which is most of you. Either their mates or the internet. And if they go to their mates go to the internet. So there's clearly something about having those really good resources available online for young people to go to. I think as middle-aged folk, including some government ministers, are getting themselves tied up in knots about social media and mental health and young people. And isn't it all awful? And there are a lot of pressures, and I know they've already been spoken about, but there is a danger of moral panic here. And people that don't understand social media are getting themselves in a right old tiz about it. And I think we have to step back and look at, okay, social media are there, they are real, we can't put them back in the box. You sometimes hear people saying, shouldn't parents stop their kids using social media at night time? Good luck. I think it's more about how we prepare and support young people to negotiate that world of social media and 24-hour communication and being accessible to one another all the time, rather than thinking we can somehow kind of squeeze it back, or it's all about naughty old Facebook. So some interesting things there to think about. What can we do to change? Just a few things. I think we really do have to keep focusing on well-being and prevention. Remember that big green circle around all young people. There is a really important job to do to protect and promote everyone's mental health, and focus on those who are kind of in the yellow and orange bits of the spectrum, as well as those who are currently poorly, to make sure we're really offering help early that helps take people away from a point of ever getting to a crisis. Support and mentoring for young people at risk of exclusion. Any child excluded from school is at an incredibly heightened risk of very, very negative outcomes. We need to start doing what I think I'm beginning to see here, going past that old idea of redesigning services by consulting people, or maybe even involving people, to get to a point where we design jointly, co-design, co-produce, as the jargon likes to talk about. So young people are actually involved in setting up and creating the service as equal partners, not as people who are consulted when grown-ups feel like it. And finally, one of the things I've heard today that I hear everywhere is that young people are absolutely obsessed about mental health at the moment. And I think this is incredibly good. It causes a lot of worry, but what an amazing opportunity. We worry about how we're going to have people working in mental health services in the future. We worry about mental health awareness endlessly. Well, we've got it. We've got a generation of young people who are absolutely desperately concerned about mental health, want to talk about mental health. What opportunities to talk about mental health? Let's do it. Let's engage. Let's excite people about the fact that there are great careers to be had in mental health support, and let's get into all the schools and sixth forms and colleges in this county and encourage people to become the mental health workforce of the future, because my goodness, we need them. At which point, that is absolutely enough from me, and thank you for listening.
Andy Bell, as with all the speakers today, giving us some massive food for thought. I think for me, it's been one of the themes of the day, early intervention. When you see some of the stats that Andy and I think Jen earlier on and other people have talked about of how much mental health is impacted in the early years of life, there's so much more that we can be doing, and obviously so much more that we will do going forward. Now, this is an interesting bit coming up because we wanted to do a question and answer session, but we've only got 5 minutes. And what with us all in the room being passionate about this subject, that's probably not going to be long enough. So we've got a bit of a compromise. If there are any questions that you have for any of the panellists who have come up here today, you can email, are we going to say email yourself?
Yeah, email myself, but we've got 5 minutes.
Yes, we're going to gather 2 or 3 people over there in a minute. So we've got about 5 minutes for any questions. But if there's anything else burning that you want to ask relating to mental health, email Jen. And I'm sure email address has been, yeah, so that's that. So we are going to welcome up back up Andy, Deborah, the Youth Health Champions, and Liz Biggs as well has gone, perhaps?
So it's Debbie Roberts as well.
It's Debbie Roberts as well. Basically all the keynote speakers I think come up, and we'll just see what happens. It's only 4 chairs, which is going to be interesting to see how we all fit, but let's see. And Nathan has a radio mic that he's going to bring around, so if you have a question, put your hands up, please.
First 3 hands I see. Then we get to ask a question.
George, do you want to join us as well? This is where we'll get ourselves set here, and then no one will have any questions. Take them to sit down to get questions. Right, question at the back of the room, I think.
I've got one question.
Okay.
First, then I'll go.
So I suppose my question is really for Andy. Andy, there's lots of stuff that we can do, but we haven't necessarily got the money to do it with. Do you have any feedback from anything that might come out of government, not to the NHS, but to local authorities?
That's fine. You might as well come up here, actually.
Okay. Good question, isn't it? I mean, I think the reason we keep emphasising the evidence is partly to support local areas and decision makers to know what to do, and partly to tell government, fund this properly. And it's not just about the NHS. The NHS has a really important part to play, but it deals with that tiny proportion of no more than 10% of young people who have a diagnosable thing that is the legitimate business of the NHS. It's local government and schools that deals with absolutely everybody else. I think that's one of the reasons for responding to the Green Paper, to say pay for it properly. We've had money coming out through Future in Mind, the national policy that began in 2015. I think it's questionable how much of that money has ever reached services other than NHS services. And I think we have to keep asking the question about that. Is it getting out to the whole system, or is it being used entirely within healthcare, as important as that is? but we need to make sure if they're making these big promises that were shown earlier, they're actually going to fund those properly, because doing it by half measures will not achieve the desired results.
Thank you, Andy. Any other questions?
Hi, Andy Stovall from Three Rivers District Council. I just noticed from the website that the mental health leads resources are very much targeted at schools, but wearing a district council hat and a safeguarding leads hat, I think there's many other practitioners out there that could benefit from those signposting guides and other tools that you've put for schools. And I would really put out a plea to share that through the Families First portal and through community safety networks as well, and colleagues in the police who would often benefit when we're working with young people at much higher risk in terms of some of our work around either homelessness or crime and disorder as well. And I think we could all benefit from sharing those resources, and that's something we could do free of charge. So just a bit of a plea to share that.
Consider it done.
How do we access it? We just go to the website?
Yeah, at the moment it's all on the Healthy Young Minds and Hearts website. Some sections, as I say, the parent and young people sections are free to access. Well, it's all free to access, but you can access without a password. Some of the professional pages you have to register. But again, it's free. It's just a case.
And we register through you.
Yeah, I think it comes up on the website for the process. But yeah, so there's loads of stuff on there, and we'll be sort of playing around with it, and also make sure that it's linked to other portals as well.
One more question.
Did you want to say something?
Yes, well, my question's kind of directed at Andy and Deborah. You said that lots of young people of our generation are interested and enthusiastic about mental health. How do you think organisations such as CAMS and the Centre for Mental Health can kind of channel this enthusiasm to encourage kind of students to kind of speak their mind?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. Thank you. And I think part of it is we need to kind of create the right channels for that to happen. So it's about having conversations within schools and schools kind of being prepared to create forums for those conversations to happen. We're very keen. I mean, we're a small national charity, but what we like to do is have blogs from people who lived experience who are able to share that and write about what they care about and what they're interested in. So we definitely like to have those. And the more of those we have, the more interesting our website becomes, but also the more we can create conversations around mental health. And we think that's really important because it's going from awareness, which, as I say, I think we don't have to worry about now, to actually kind of knowledge and intelligence and understanding. And I think for CAMS, for me, it is about that co-production question. You know, actually kind of create services in conversation with the young people who care about it and get it and have experienced it and lived it. Rather than make assumptions about what grown-ups think people want.
Well, I just add to that, in Hertfordshire we've obviously utilised young people quite a lot in the co-production of our CAMS transformation programme, and we also have a youth council that's made up of service users that are accessing our services to help us to understand the perspective from young people.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Anything else before?
Very quick one. Andy said that the Green Paper didn't go far enough. Give us 3 things that we can write to our MP about.
Oh, great! Thank you. That was that's a wonderful question. You can come again. I think the first one is we have to make sure that there is proper resourcing for the mental health leads in schools. As we understand the Green Paper, it's something that schools are requested politely to do. I don't think that's good enough. It's great to have a mental health lead in schools, but there's enough demands on the workforce already. People aren't lacking things to do, and there's an enormous amount of pressure, and many schools have lost pastoral staff. So that's got to be properly resourced and supported, and they've got to be looked after and developed. I think we need a much greater attention to the opportunities for learning around mental health and well-being. So again, there are some very well developed things like social and emotional learning which take evidence-based programs into the classroom. Those should be available in every single school, primary as well as secondary. And then I think there's something about schools as a link point to other forms of support in the community, things we've heard about today. The focus of the Green Paper tends to be on those children who, again, going back to that circle, are in the the red and the maroon, and a few who are in the orange. What are we going to do to really kind of make better support available around prevention? So again, things like availability of parenting programs, and why aren't we doing that broader role of supporting young people's well-being rather than the very important, albeit very important, job of speeding up access to specialist services for those who really need it. Is that all right?
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Okay, as we said, if you've got any longer questions, email them over to Jen. If you haven't got her email address, we'll work out a way to make sure you get that. But we're now going to move on, and I'm going to disappear off the stage because I don't know much about this, to the tabletop exercise. So over to Jen.
Yeah, so there should be some facilitators in the room. Could the facilitators just stand up? Just so hopefully we'll have a facilitator per table. If not, flag up. Let us know, because I can come and sit with one of the tables. So until sort of 20 past 4, if you could be working through some activities on your table, your facilitator will talk you through what's the questions that we want to look at, and there's some of them are up here as well. And then we're going to ask for just 1 or 2 points of feedback from each table. And if you could keep those brief, just so we can keep to making sure everyone can leave at 4:30. So yeah, we have until 20 past. Thank you. Hi everyone, just to say, if you haven't already started moving on to the second lot of questions, you might want to just think about that now. I don't have the booming voice or charisma of Andy Holmes, but I'm going to try and get you all to stop now, if that's okay, so we can get some feedback and get you all away on time. Andy has had to leave us just because he's given the other Andy a lift, so I'll just take the opportunity to say thank you to Andy Holmes, because I think he did a fantastic job today. So, Nathan, are you happy to go around each table? If we start with yourselves, some feedback.
Hello. All right, yeah, it's working. Okay, so there was, for the first one or two things about Just Talk that has worked really well. So there was consensus on our table that the celebrity engagement and having sort of football players which engaged boys and young men really well worked extremely well. And 1 or 2 ideas for continuing and strengthening Just Talk. So a couple of ideas that we had was, first of all, Snapchat. We thought that would be a really good way of engaging young people because we know how often they use that. And also, we've got district council colleagues on our table who thought it'd be really good for us to kind of promote this through the district councils, and they kind of heard about it through a roundabout way. So that was another way of taking that forward.
Wonderful, thank you. That's really helpful. Shall we go? Is this clockwise? Yes, clockwise.
Yeah, we thought those 2 things as well. What's worked well, we also came up with the young people's involvement. I think, just today they've been amazing, haven't they? So obviously some of those young people were in the little films that we did, and that's made a massive difference. Ideas to help it continue. My table, people from schools think a Just Talk champion in every school.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. Great idea. Thanks, Fiona.
Hi, well, we actually bucked the trend and decided that we were actually going to answer question 3.
Okay.
So our question was about that we spent a lot of time looking at, what are the key mental health needs of boys in my local area? And I think for me, one of the key points that's kind of emerged out of our discussion was just that boys present very differently to how girls present, and actually sometimes when boys present through their behaviour, they're seen in inverted commas as being bad or naughty, as opposed to they are actually in distress, and it's their way of expressing that they need help. And I think just the other point I wanted to pick up, because we've got so much rich stuff which we'll write up later, is that there's colleagues here around the table are seeing a lot more self-harm. Mm-hmm. In younger ages, but again, it's been demonstrated differently, so perhaps not so much self-harming as you might expect with girls, perhaps scratching, etc. But actually, one colleague was talking about bashing heads against walls, that type of expression. So some worrying trends that we're seeing sort of earlier and earlier, I think.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sue.
Hi. We picked up quite a lot of those points as well. We'd echo all of that. I think the thing we thought worked really well was, again, the young people's involvement. I think that's really been so well received and very powerful, and that was definitely, and the male role models, definitely something we felt was very positive. And in terms of improving the campaign and helping it to get stronger, it's more of that. It's getting the young people to help us get our messages out. So using the youth councils, asking young people to help us with designing website material. It's that voice of the young people to share the campaign, so it comes from them rather than from us.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jo.
Are we going through each question, or we just got to pick one, or just our highlights?
Any key points that you'd like to share?
Okay, so, well, we were saying that we thought the social media side of it was really good for question one, what would work well. We were sort of discussing that there's still issues around the stigma. I know we've gone a long way with that. But some of the schools around the table were saying that some young people were still saying, well, I don't really want to talk about it because it's about being mental, and that there's still an issue with parents maybe, and that coming down from parents, that those are the views. So maybe the young people might have slightly different views if their parents were thinking about it differently, but that's sort of the impressions they're getting from that. And then for our... I suppose it's quite ironic that we were talking about some cases of boys who are displaying through behaviour, as we were saying, with behavioural issues, but are not being able to talk about it. So schools not really being able to, even though they're trying to identify what the issue is for the young person, they can't because they won't talk about it. But obviously there's stuff coming out through behaviour. So we just had more of a discussion about how we might be able to tackle that and what other services we could get in place to support that.
Brilliant, thanks Shelley. And I think actually something I wanted to say earlier that's reminded me of, and I think it's a really key point. Stigma does still exist, stigma will still exist, and campaigns like this are so important to challenge that stigma, but they won't do it overnight. So it's really important that nothing that we do is a sort of flash in the pan one-off. We have to keep on plugging away and plugging away and plugging away, and that's the only way that we'll see a shift in that stigma. So this is the start of the conversation. Well, really the conversation started years ago, but it's about plugging away, and we'll hopefully get there at some point in the future. Thank you, Shelley, that was great.
Our group felt that, again, managing to reach so many people successfully through social media was a real achievement, and also that hopefully what comes out from today will enable all partners to develop a really strong vision and plan going forward with timescales so that we know what our next steps are. We also had a conversation about how sometimes boys and young men don't want to access talking therapies, and about how we need to perhaps develop more provision that serves as a diversion or is more practical in nature, so that boys and young men can talk alongside doing another activity.
Thanks, Deborah.
Yeah, I think we just echo exactly everything that's said about social media. Instagram was definitely the way forward, as George was saying, and even suggested, you can swipe and have little, so it could have a Just Talk swipe when they swipe it across and things like that. One of the ideas forward is these guys have done brilliantly, and how that could, we were in primary, how they could then become mentors and come into primary.
Wonderful idea.
Work with our year fives and sixes. And as to the next question, it's again the same, it's coming out in antisocial behaviour. We're saying about poor emotional literacy, the language that they're using with each other, banter, but also the language people are using to their man up.
Fantastic, thank you. And then I think our last table.
So one of the points that we picked up on as a priority for the Just Talk campaign in the future is the education of parents in reducing the destigmatisation of mental health and kind of improving emotional literacy and reducing the disparity between attitudes towards mental health between our generation and our parents' generation, and kind of offering training and support for parents so that they can have conversations with their children and address their mental health needs.
Fantastic, and I just want to echo what was said earlier, because I attended the Sandringham conference earlier in the year, and was blown away by it, quite frankly. It was fantastic, and having the parents there was something that isn't often done, and it was such an important aspect of the day. So I completely echo that. I think there's much more we can do around parents and supporting parents. Thank you very much. Thank you. So we will collate all of these and write them up, and we'll make sure we put all the slides and everything up so everyone has access to everything. And that just leaves me really to thank everyone. I genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, appreciate everyone's input to this campaign and to today. We couldn't have done any of this without you. It could just be a small group of us sitting in an office talking about things, but actually this is an example of something that started in an office and has grown and become much bigger. And I think we should all be incredibly proud of that, every single one of us who's here. So thank you. And yeah, hopefully I will keep you posted on all the progressions, and anyone who wants to get involved, talk to me, because, you know, I'd love to have everyone on board.
The one person who hasn't been thanked today is you and the team. So on behalf of everybody, I think thank you for your leadership on this and for all you've done, and to everybody in the team. I have to say, there's a wonderful quote from Umberto Eco, which is, before you caught my eye, I didn't see you. Once I did, I couldn't look away. That kind of describes the feeling that I go away with today from this event. So to you for your leadership, and to all of you for yours, I think we should all give Jane and yourselves a round of applause.
And please complete your evaluation forms. Thank you.